Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. I'm Dan, your host. Got a really good show today. I know I say that every week, but this one's good too. On a topic that I'm very passionate about. So for those of you that don't know, I was heavily involved about 20 years ago with trying to get shared parenting passed in the state of New York. Actually helped write one of the bills that was put in. And unfortunately, that bill's still floating around. But I have on as my guest Jesse Cickavage. Am I saying that right, Jesse?
Cickavage.
I wasn't even close. I'm sorry, my friend. I should have asked you before we went on air. So Jesse is involved with Iowa Fathers. Yep. And is working on the shared parenting bill there. So he's agreed to come on, and we're going to have a discussion about shared parenting, talk a little bit about his bill and how we can support it. So Jesse, let's start out by having you just tell everyone who you are and what's going on.
My name is Jesse Cickavage. I'm a engineer, and the last 4 years or so, I've been a father/parental rights advocate. After my divorce, I started working with a group called Families United Action Network in Iowa. And then at that point, I kind of branched into Iowa Fathers. And I actually am now owner of Iowa Fathers.
Oh, you own it?
Yes, that's correct.
I didn't know that. So okay.
The founder ran it around 20 years. His name's Brian Eel. He's still very active. He kind of he's more of a consultant kind of base now, but he went about 20 years with it, and me and my friend Curtis actually kind of took the leads from him.
So what is it? So explain to the audience, what exactly is your overall purpose? I know part of it is shared parenting, but in general, what are you seeking to do as a group?
Our mission is just mostly to preserve the parent-child relationship. A lot of people think that they see Iowa Fathers as the name, but we help both women and children and dads, and it's not specific to just dads. Because of the fact that, well, around 86% of dads are the ones that lose custody. That's just kind of how the organization started. But mostly we help people to the extent we're legally allowed to with, pro se representation in court, anything they may need help getting direction on what to file and things like that. We have a couple paralegals that help us out, a couple attorneys that help us out. Mostly we work on building relationships with people that have been through the current system and been affected by it. And so far, our goal over the last couple of years is amassing the numbers of people that recognize that there's a problem. And we're a nonprofit. Every single person that works with us is unpaid. Any father's rights group will tell you that any donations are extremely limited. So we haven't really focused on any of that. It's just everyone helping us is kind of just strictly in it because they know it needs to be done.
Yeah, you bring up a good point that you mentioned, which, and I, like I said, about 20 years ago, I was with Fathers and Families of New York. I was actually the secretary of the organization. What people don't realize is they tend to think it's all men. And in our case, again, about 20 years ago, it was probably about half our membership was women. And it wasn't just, everybody goes, oh, it's just the stepmothers. No, there were a few of them. Don't get me wrong. There were actually women who were the primary custodial parent that joined our group and saw what was going on and just didn't agree with what was happening. We had a wide range of women involved. So I think that's a common misconception that people have. It's that, oh, it's just a bunch of angry fathers. I'm sure you've heard that one before. I know I have. I still do, actually. But the reality is it's a coalition. It's, like I said, in our case, it was about 50-50 as far as our membership. when you're seeing, one of the things that I always often saw as the women were actually more vocal, more dedicated, to be blunt about it. And I understand why. The guys, when guys are going through a divorce, the emotional upheaval, as I'm sure you know, is tremendous, and they struggle with that. But the women seem to be able to cut that out a little bit better, to give them credit. What are you seeing in your group with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Same thing. A lot of our strongest advocates are women. I mean, it's hard enough to get guys to kind of stand up because, I mean, from what guys are just destroyed when they go through this.
Yeah, they are.
You're talking to a bunch of depressed, financially crippled guys, and you're trying to get them to stand up and be activists. That is not an easy task, you know. But I think the reason we see so many, you know, stepmoms, etc., grandmothers working on this is because they watched that guy get destroyed. Because of the fact that a lot of women do stand up, the opposition likes to pinpoint that and say that, well, why isn't dad doing anything? But what I say to that is, it's like, you just destroyed dad, you know, like
exactly.
Like what percentage of guys are going to be able to get back up after being completely destroyed? They've had their kids ripped from them. They've been financially ruined. They've got some judge up there telling them that they're not an equal parent. I mean, what do people expect? But luckily, if you look hard enough, there are plenty of guys that are willing to not just sit down and take it.
You know, one of the things that I found is the younger guys really struggle with it. You know, and I include myself in that, by the way. So back when I talked about this last week with David, we were talking about the emotional aspect of divorce for guys. And I talked a little bit about how my first time going into state Supreme Court and then family court, I thought it was going to be like Law and Order, you know. You walk in, the judge is going to hear the evidence.
Oh, yeah.
You know, blah, blah, blah. Oh, did I get my eyes opened? The truth, that's irrelevant in those courts. But it speaks to, you know, as I've gotten older and as I got older in that and got involved with trying to support men and all that, with age comes wisdom, I guess. And that's not to knock the younger guys. But as I mentioned last week, and David did too, one of the things I encourage guys to do is go to family court before you have to go in and just observe. I don't know if it's legal in Iowa.
It is, yeah. Anyone can go watch.
It's generally, most states, you're allowed to go in. They will close the courtroom for things like adoptions and stuff like that. But get educated. So if you think you're going to have a divorce or you're in the middle of one, you've gotten served papers, my advice, my friends, get your butt in there and go see what it is so you can emotionally prepare. And then the other side of it is reach out for support. And one of the best ways to reach out for support is groups like Jesse's, because he's been through it. He can kind of guide you. Like you said, you have paralegals on your staff. We had them also. They can help with things like paperwork and all that. I really encourage it. So let's get into the meat of this. The thing I'm passionate about, the thing I guarantee you are passionate about, shared parenting. In a nutshell, what is shared parenting? How do you define it?
My personal definition is respecting a child's right to equal access to both parents. And I base the need of shared parenting on the fact that kids do need moms and they do need dads. And I'd leave it at that.
That is a perfect definition, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that to suck up, all right? It's also, by the way, the definition you'll usually hear from men. Both parents need to be involved in the children's lives. The opposition, one should be the parent, the other should become a, quotes, visitor. And don't get me started on that term. So when we say shared parenting under that definition, what does that really mean? What's the meat and potatoes behind it? Common people think, or a common thought people have, is that it's exactly 50-50. And I try and explain that's not always what it is. Where are you at with all that?
Well, I think most arrangements end up to be like 1 week on, 1 week off, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and yeah, I've seen people get hung up on that too. Like if if it isn't precisely
Exactly.
equal,
Yep.
then oh, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go to
Yep.
we're gonna get held in contempt, and it doesn't need to be that that it doesn't need to be that precise. It just
Right.
an approximately equal, and by approximate, I'm not meaning that. It doesn't mean dad gets every other weekend and then mom gets the whole rest of the time. I mean, it's certainly better than that, but
Yeah.
I've seen that argument made a lot.
I have too. And it's, I always say to people, if the 50-50 number is the starting point, let's make that assumption. And that's actually what we wrote into our bill way back when in New York, is that, and we'll talk about your bill in a little bit, but it was essentially that the judge starts with the assumption it's going to be 50-50, and then you adjust from there. At the time in New York, it was roughly 80 some odd percent, I forget the exact number, custody, primary custody as they legally call it, went to the mother. Only about 7% went to the fathers. And then the rest was not joint custody, because when we're saying primary custody, that means the parent that has the child the majority of the time. That's what we're talking about. And then the rest of it was about a 50-50 split. So it was only, I'm ballparking, 5 to 8% of the time it was in a close to equal split. And one of the things I would say to guys that, I want exactly 50-50, you got to step back. Because one, it almost never is going to work out that way. There are exceptions. The other side of it they need to look at is if you aren't willing to negotiate, be flexible and all that, I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to end up with. Every other weekend and one night a week for dinner. Because that's the standard order across the board in the United States. So step back from expecting exactly 50-50. Starting point, absolutely, it should be. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But then go from there. There's going to be times where she's going to go on vacation. You're going to have the kids more. You may want to go on vacation. She's going to have the kids more. When you create that adversarial system where you're just digging your heels in, and I'm sure you've got guys that have done that. I know I've dealt with many of them. It's a lose-lose situation. You're not going to win. I don't know of a single instance where a guy dug his heels in that deep and came out, I hate to use the term winning, but got what he wanted. Let's go with that. What are you seeing with that?
Yeah, we actually have to kind of turn a lot of guys away because they get caught up in, like you said, the adversarial system where it's like, it becomes more about, this is my right and I'm going to exercise it, But what we try and focus people, and our bill is focused on what the kid's right is and the necessity for the kids to be around both parents. But yeah, when they, and it happens on either side, right? You see moms complaining about, I don't know, how a kid's hair was cut, or dad, or dad complaining about mom was 30 seconds late. You see that on both sides, and that has to stop.
Yeah, it's the one that loses in that situation is the child. And
100%.
As much, there's always, I went through a horrific divorce. I've talked about it before. I also went through one that was about as easy as it could be. The two of us sat down. We didn't even use a lawyer for that part of it. Here's what all right, what do you want? What do I want? Blah, 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 blah. We went back and forth. Wrote the whole thing up, basically. I actually wrote it up. We handed it to an attorney. Go make this legal. It cost us less than $1,000. Absolutely zero animosity. None. And our daughter benefited from it. As opposed to the other one, I spent over $100,000 in legal fees. I eventually did get custody. I wish it had never gotten to that point. It's a balancing act. You do want to stand up for yourself. You do have rights as a parent, as a father, but you also have to, in my opinion, and a lot of guys lose this, you have to step back, take the emotion out of it, and look at what's realistic. That's the term I use, and really put your children first. And to be honest, I think most guys actually do that. There are the few, and I'm sure you've dealt with them, that just cannot get out of the way of themselves. But when you step back and put the children first, and then, by the way, just as a side note, the judges see this and don't think it doesn't matter, because it does. If you go in a courtroom and start slamming things, and the Constitution says, well, parenting's not in the Constitution, by the way, and they like to rattle off all these laws, it's like that judge is going to view you as an angry dad. You're screwed. So with your bill, now I want to get into the talking about the bill a little bit, what your goal is behind it, what the bill says. I've read through it. I think it's an excellent bill. It is not perfect, but no bill is. Okay. So why don't you talk about the bill, the goal behind it, and maybe a little bit of the history, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, like you had mentioned, running bills yourself, in Iowa, this has been going on for 20, 30 years. I only go back to 20 because I know the guys that were doing it 20 years ago. I don't know the guys that were doing it 30 years ago.
Okay.
But well, it's a little funny because one of the guys that went with me to the Capitol recently, walked up to one of the legislators and said, do you remember me? Because the last time I talked to you, you still had brown hair.
Oh, oh, that was good.
So, yeah. So basically, like most states have, we've tried laying it out entirely, exactly what it needs to be, where, everything is controlled by the statute. But we kept getting from the Iowa State Bar Association and domestic rights groups and just the opposition in general of this takes away discretion from the judge. The kids need the discretion. It's going to let abusers get custody, etc.
Same arguments they've been making for 30 years.
Oh, yep. Exactly. And so what we did with this bill, because we saw that in particular, the lawyer opposition from this likes to muddy the water. They like to just completely misconstrue what the bill's doing. So our goal was, we will make a bill that's so easy to read, the general public can see what it does. And like you said, it's not exactly 100% what we'd want, but it is we're meeting in the middle. And basically we are modifying no other Iowa code except for specifically the custody code, and we're leaving legal custody alone. Actually, that's what we're doing, is we tie physical custody to joint legal custody. That's all the bill does, is if a parent is fit, they're not a danger, etc., therefore can have joint legal custody, they have then that installs a presumption for joint physical custody.
Right.
And all of the protections are in place. Any abuse or criminal activity, etc., that would have already been caused to sever legal custody will remove the presumption to physical care. And that's really all the bill does.
It's sad that you have to put that verbiage in the bill. We did the same thing, right? To kind of go back to what you were saying about how in our case, the Bar Association for New York fought it tooth and nail. Follow the money. Because where do the lawyers make the money? When there's acrimony between the two parties. The last thing in the world they want is, oh geez, both parties know they're going to have a decent shot of having, we'll call it equal custody, joint custody, whatever term you want to use. Oh no, we need to be able to fire them up and get them battling so we can make money. And I've had lawyers actually admit that to me behind the scenes. They'll never admit it publicly. It ain't happening.
Yep. We've had a lawyer actually on our side come in and say he's speaking on this against his best interest, because lawyers do make money on this. We had a lawyer say that right in the legislatures. I think it was 2 years ago. Bill still didn't go through. So
that's because most of them are lawyers. Most legislators are lawyers. People don't I think, realize that. And so they have a vested interest in not passing the bill doing that.
And one of their biggest problems with our bill in particular is since we tied it to joint legal custody, that means that there's a clear and convincing evidentiary burden. So right now everything's preponderance of the evidence, which if people aren't familiar with that, it's who does the judge believe because of what their cousin's sister said in testimony or whatever. So clear and convincing evidence is what it would take to override this presumption, because that's what it takes to override joint legal. And they don't like that. And what I believe the reason for that is because you can't just go to court and throw mud. If a lawyer wants to, generate billable hours, etc., they have to come in with something substantial and evidence, not just he said, she said, etc.
Right.
Or here the kid's aunt can testify to this happened or what have you. It needs to be actual evidence, which I think is a protection that kids deserve. If we're going to be deciding what is going to dictate the rest of this kid's 18 years of life, then I don't think it's too unreasonable to ask for a little bit of evidence.
One of the things we had with our bill that we were pushing was that we wanted the judges, and this is one of the reasons they fought it so hard, we wanted the judges to have to put into writing their reasons for not having joint custody. And it could be something as very simple as, I found enough evidence that, say, domestic violence was going on or whatever. Again, and you have it in your bill, I'll call them the outs for the judge are there, right? If he sees this domestic violence situation, a child's being abused, whatever, there's nothing tying his or her hands, which is what the opponents will say. Oh, the judge's hands are completely tied. No, they're not. He still has total discretion. All we're asking is that he enumerate what he saw in the evidence, she, and say, the child is better off, best interest of the child, that term, being with parent A or B because, and then the list. That I don't think that's unreasonable. As you said, these judges are making decisions going to affect the child the rest of their life, not just up until 18 or 21 or 26, depending on your state, literally the rest of their life. I'm a child of divorce. What happened with my parents 50 years ago still affects me, right? And unfortunately, I think the opposition wants to muddy those waters, as you talked about, because it's to their benefit to not have that happen. And the judges, I've actually talked and interviewed family court judges way back when. And as one of them said to me, they have biases. They do everything they can. I think most of them come from a good heart with it. I really do. And guys get really mad at me for saying that. But I think the majority of them, they're bound to the law. So whatever the legislature puts into law, they have to follow. They want some discretion, but their fear is, and it was more in relation to domestic violence than anything, but it happens with children too. If they, quotes, make a mistake and, somebody gets killed, that's going in the news and they're going to get hammered for it. And they always have that in the back of their mind. So that's why you'll see the Bar Association and the judges fight it a little bit. On the other side of it, as I think as you're experiencing, we've seen where lawyers have stepped up and went, hey, wait a minute, this is different. And I've seen judges. So the one, and I talked about this before, Judge Judy, she actually testified in support of shared parenting in New York. So
really?
She is
I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, yeah. So what you see on TV, that's who she is. So she came in. We had it in committee, and so they were doing testimony. So we had Now was in there, my friend Marcia Pappas, who despises every fiber of my being. She was the head of Now. She does her thing. A couple of us talked, and then in comes Judge Judy. And let me tell you, she took the room over. And she's a family court judge. She formerly was a family court judge. And she just shredded the opposition. Shredded them. This bill needs to pass. I just sat there stunned at what I was hearing, because I'm like, wait a minute. One, she's a woman. Two, she's a family court judge and a celebrity, right? And she said the way the law is now, it does not benefit children. But my hands are tied by the legislature. I have to declare, I'm paraphrasing all of this, but I have to declare one parent is better than the other when in reality I know they're both equally good. And that's where a shared parenting bill, the benefit to it is really for the child. It's saying both parents are valued to the child. Both parents need to be involved with the child, and we need to come from that presumption as opposed to the adversarial, one parent's better than the other. With your bill, like I said, it's not perfect. I actually think it's very, very good. It's one of the better ones I've seen, to your credit, because I do think it is putting the child first, and it's palatable to the politicians, right? What are you seeing? Like, how is it going with that? I know it went into one committee. I was reading some of the stuff you sent me. Where is it at right now?
Well, so we actually got it introduced in both the House and the Senate. The House bill was HF 485. That went to subcommittee and got dunked. The Representative Stephen Holt, I think, is listening to the bar quite closely on the bill, and the bar was there, of course, and a domestic violence group, and it didn't take off. It's indefinitely postponed. So the bill that came out prior to that one is SF 274, and that's the one that's still going strong. It passed Senate subcommittee, and it passed Senate Judiciary Committee full vote, and now we're just waiting on it to go to the Senate floor. After it goes to the Senate floor, then it goes back to the House, and we are trying to get the House to say that they'll pass it. Representative Julian Garrett is the sponsor of the bill in the Senate, and he's rightfully cautious that whenever he sends it to the House, we need to know that it's not going to just get taken down right then and there. So right now we're kind of biding time, trying to work on the House of Representatives to try and make sure that that doesn't happen, because it has to pass both chambers. So that's where it's at right now. Same old opposition. Nothing's come up that has surprised us. It's just that I personally feel that the opposition simply just doesn't understand the bill, and I don't think that it's because of a lack of comprehending it. I think that they're listening too much to the opposition is all.
That's usually the case, right? Let's be honest. The opposition is very strong, right? You generally have the Bar Association against you. You're going to have the media primarily against you, although we did actually turn them back in the day. We actually had multiple newspapers come out in support of our bill and publish op-eds on it. But even having that didn't work. But
we've reached out to news and dead set, just crickets.
Yeah, the only way, I think the reason we got it is the Albany Times-Union, which is where the capital in New York was Albany. They actually published an op-ed fully supporting the bill. So they, to their credit, they allowed us to have discourse within it. So I was writing articles, people from Now were writing articles, and it went back and forth. They did like, for lack of a better term, a he said, she said type thing in their opinion page. And then ultimately they came out in support of it. After they did that, we used that as ammo. So we went to various cities, Buffalo, Rochester, New York City, like the New York Post came out and said something. But it's getting that first one is damn hard. And the only way I think it really worked was there was an editor at the Times-Union that was going through a divorce. And so that was his impetus for doing it. But as I said, you have a lot of opposition. The women's groups, I hate to say this, guys, but they're way stronger than we are generally. They got a lot more money. People will donate to them. They never donate to the fathers groups, I mean, I poured my own money in to keep things going. I'm
Hmm.
sure you're dealing with that also. But to kind of go back to the political side of it, because I think this is an important discussion, Jesse, for us to have, is so the guys understand. They really struggle with the whole political side of it. Why doesn't this bill just go through? Why can't you just ram it through? Um, you talked about how one bill went to committee and stalled there. That's very common. I've seen that in talking with people from other states. All you
Hmm.
really need is one person on a committee that can stop it, right? Depending, I don't know what the size of your committees are in Iowa.
It is essentially it's three people on the
There you go.
subcommittees, and the chair of the committee is the guy that gets to
That's all
decide
it
which.
takes.
Yep.
We had one. Her name was Deborah Glick, um, and she stopped it cold because there was her and another person, Carl Heasty, who's now, by the way, the assembly leader in New York. So shared parenting will never go through in New York as long as he's the assembly leader. Um, but they have that ability in subcommittee or committee to stop it there. But once you get a bill out, which it sounds like the other bill you have gotten out of committee, it goes to the floor. And to speak to what you were talking about, guys need to realize it's two separate parts of the houses. There's the Senate or of the legislature, there's the Senate and the House. And that's universal pretty much, same as Congress, right? A
Hmm.
bill has to pass both of them before it goes to the governor. Then you got to get the governor to sign it, which
Yep.
that's a whole other battle. Um, and you have to make sure that the wording in the bill, because what will happen is it'll come out of, let's say, the Senate, go to the House. The House will rewrite the bill the way they want it. And then usually they have to negotiate back and forth. That's how bills get passed primarily.
Hmm.
It's not, cut and dried as most guys think. So the process you're talking about, it sounds like you've made quite a bit of headway actually, because you got it out of committee, at least the one. What are you seeing with the House as far as, are they trying to tinker with the bill? Are they leaving it alone? What's going on with that?
Well, that's the interesting part is the House has always been, I believe, long before my time, it actually passed the House and then not the Senate once, maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago.
That happens.
So, but so far, for pretty much all of the time that people have been doing this in Iowa, it's always been the House that has stopped it. And what we hear back is, we need to do something about this, but I don't think that this is the bill that does it. But it's like, okay, well, it's been 3 decades, or maybe one of you guys could write a bill then instead
Yeah.
of the and 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 the interesting part that I think corresponds with that and makes me wonder is, so to, like you said, people, they can amend the bill, recommend changes, etc., but it always just stops.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've acknowledged something should be done. They had this opportunity. There was no changes needed to be made. Like, but it just needed to be indefinitely, tabled. So, I I think, like you said, I think most of it is the House does have the most lawyers, and the bar just seems to have higher influence on them. The domestic violence groups, actually see with this particular bill that there is less resistance. After the
Really?
Senate after the Senate subcommittee, we pointed out to them that domestic abuse protective orders would still work as they want them to work with this bill.
That's a major
Um,
hurdle you're overcoming then.
well, domestic violence, it's Chapter 236 in Iowa, civil domestic abuse protective orders, and like everyone knows, they're a preponderance of evidence
Mm-hmm.
standard, and the language in joint legal custody is that it does that we're tying physical custody to. It does require clear and convincing evidence, but in this instance, it kind of works like, is there clear and convincing evidence that a protective order exists? Even though the protective order was preponderance, you see, it's still that kind of, I see that kind of satisfied them a little bit. I personally still think that is a problem, and actually I consider that an imperfection in the bill. But
Mm-hmm.
we left it there, because, people running these bills, everyone likes to act like, oh, these bunch of dads are trying to sneak one in on, without us seeing it, like this evil bill. But it's like, we're not dumb. We know this is under so all the scrutiny it could possibly be under. We're not trying to sneak anything in.
It's funny you say it that way, because that's how they think, though. They think we're trying to slide something by. We're just asking for basics, really. The fact that you've got less opposition from the domestic violence groups, that's huge, my friend. I have to tell you, because the ninnies from now, I'll say it that way, they are their own group. But I will tell you, politicians see them for what they are. They really do. Domestic violence group, that's a whole other ballgame, because they have tremendous power to sway legislators and judges, because the fear is, as I talked about earlier, no legislator, no judge wants the domestic violence industry coming back going, see, that law you passed or that decision you made, that got so-and-so killed. And they do use that as a weapon. So that's a really good sign. I'm excited to hear that. Where are you seeing support from other than your group? Are you seeing it from anywhere else?
We are, yep. There's a group called the Family Leader in Iowa. They're a fairly large group that is they're more of like a kind of a religious organization, but they're a very large group, and that's helping us out a little bit. And then in general, we've actually had just a lot of emails come through. We tried things a little differently this year. Like we acknowledge that the general public, they're not really all that well versed with how this all happens. So on our website, we put up, here's all of the senators, here's all of the senators' emails, here's all the House emails, here's some information. Please send that through. And we've had we've had a large amount of emails come through to these senators. But as far as organizations themselves, not really, no. But okay. There's not that many. There's really not that many against it either, though, because the people against it is the Iowa attorney, or the Iowa Bar Association, and then one domestic abuse group. They do vote against it. Just we've seen that they've become a little more understanding since the Senate subcommittee.
Things have changed. Back in the day when I was trying to get our bill through, social media didn't exist, and email, it was around, but it wasn't what it is now. So fax machines were the thing. So we set up a campaign. You'll love this one. We gave the phone number. We gave the exact verbiage to send, which was one line: I support shared parenting. Bill, blah, blah, blah. That was all it was. They begged us to take that down because we just flooded them. It was so bad, because I was in the LOB's legislative office building. I was there when it was going on, and I was sitting in one assemblyman's office who was the co-sponsor on the bill, and his fax machine just churned. He goes, I support you. I co-signed on this bill. Will you tell them to stop? I'm like, dude, go to your fellow legislators and tell them what's going on. They begged us. We churned a lot of taxpayer dollars in fax paper, but it worked. That's awesome. It worked because, our tactic kind of changed a little bit. And I want to talk to you about that, see if you're doing this too. New York may be different, but in New York at the time, the House was controlled, the Assembly was controlled by the Democrats. The Senate at the time was controlled by the Republicans. So it was both parties we had to try and sway. And I hate getting into the politics on all this, but the bottom line is both parties either supported or opposed it pretty much equally, right? And we started going around trying to get co-sponsors. So our instead of trying to focus on the votes, we specifically said, we want you to co-sponsor the bill. Because if they're co-sponsoring it, they're voting for it. right? They're not going to co-sponsor a bill and then say, no, I didn't support it. That would be asinine. And at one point, we had enough people co-sponsoring it that if it had ever gotten to the floor, it was going to pass, and everybody knew it. I mean, we had 2/3 of the Assembly and Senate were going to vote for it. Do you, and it may be different in Iowa, but do you have a lot of co-sponsors on the bill, or how's that working there?
We have in the past. We've had, two co-sponsors or so. This year we don't, but that's because part of our strategy this year was we released the bill to be introduced by Senator Garrett. Probably, if I remember correctly, it was the 13th of February, and got it introduced, I believe, in the next week and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And that was intentional, because we know where the funding stream comes from to oppose this, and that turning out to be what seems, I mean, there's no confirmation to this, but what seems to be accurate is a little disheartening. But we did hear that there was a lobbyist check recently written for about $100,000 a couple weeks ago in response. So it was just Senator Garrett, and then Representative Helena Hayes is the one in the House that sent HF 485 through. But like I said, that was indefinitely postponed. So this one, we kind of did a surprise attack here. It was simple bill, and all of a sudden here it is.
That's actually genius on your part.
Yep. Well, we don't have funding. Everyone's volunteer. There's less of us than the opposition. We can't take the chance that they're going to work against it for months prior to when this gets up for subcommittee. But what I think we've done now is we've set the stage where a lot of people know about this, and because the bill's simple, I think they see what it can do, or what it does. And next year, if this doesn't go through next year, we've got some particular strategies we're going to try out, playing on that based off of the fact that everyone in the public's pretty much seen this now. We've got guys putting SF's 274 on there with window paint on their trucks.
Nice.
If this doesn't go through this year, we've got an entire year to show how simple this bill was, and get people to ask the questions on why it didn't go through.
You brought up a really important point there. The average person, when they hear what the bill really is, supports it. I forget the exact percentages, but there was a poll done by one of the papers in New York back in the day, and they found it was like 87, 88, somewhere in there, percentage of the people supported it, and published that. Of course, we use that like a hammer to bludgeon the legislature, because it's like, look, their fear is that if the bill goes through, the women's groups are going to come after them. We're like 80 whatever percent are going to support you. And one of the things I think that really helps is what you're talking about. Bumper stickers. It sounds so lame, but we used them. Support bill, whatever, support shared parenting. Guys would put them on their vehicles, and people would honk at them and thumbs up. I had it happen many times. You'd be at a red light, somebody will pull up next to you and goes, "Yeah, I support you," and all that. And makes you feel good, first of all, but it also makes you realize the public does recognize what's going on. Go ahead.
Well, to put it, I mean, it's such a simple thing. It's honestly, the only reason this hasn't been passed is, I believe, is simply because that water has been muddied so substantially. You and me here wouldn't be talking right now if that water hadn't been muddied like that. I mean, it's both parents get to see the kids equally when there's no finding of unfitness and no child abuse. Like, that's really all there is to it. Like, who would oppose that? And that's exactly what this does. If there's, if we have right now, like, we've been kind of uh, helping on support Ohio's bill on social media.
Mhm.
Rodney Creech is the representative running that, and he put it very well. He said something to the effect of, we don't need kids to lose contact with their parent on just the opinion of someone. And I think
Wow, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yep.
And unfortunately, when you really think about it, it's the judge's opinion that makes the decision, right?
Well, and there's no jury, you know,
Nope.
and the evidence burden is the lowest that exists in law, and that's one of the things that the domestic violence group came up after us with is we're not gonna be able to. We're gonna have victims that can't prove their abuse, and then they're gonna have shared care with their abuser. And I said, and I was just, okay, who's more likely to lie in court, the victim or the abuser? Because I'll tell you, the low evidence burden protects the person that's lying. It's not protecting the person telling the truth.
Spot on.
That's how it works in criminal. You know, that is the only stipulation that protects against something that is not true. And when they try and control the language. That's how they're trying to fight this. They control the language. So it's gone from what is the reality, where an evidentiary burden is to stop false allegations, stop untruths, what have you, and that's how it's always functioned in criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
But they've turned it around to where, and it sounds, they do a good job of making it sound this way, but that the low evidentiary burden is to allow victims to be able to prove their case easier. But okay, so we're not going to allow a victim to prove their case easier in criminal law, but when we're deciding something so important about a kid, we're going, then now we can allow this, and it doesn't quite line up to me. In my opinion, basically, I think that the kids deserve that evidentiary burden on decisions relating to their whole life. That they need the kids. The evidentiary burden protects the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care what it does about the parents. It protects the kids, and I don't care which parent would lie or is lying. If we have one guy with no jury deciding who's telling the truth, it's not too much to ask for some evidence.
And another important point to add to all of that, and that was quite well put, is that the family court judges basically, they read both sides' briefs, whatever that might be. They walk into the courtroom. The majority of the time, those cases are 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. Some are longer, some are shorter, but in general, and I've gone and observed many cases I've gone in with guys, you're looking at 15 to 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. That's
going to determine the next up to 18 to 26 years of the child's life. And, I hate defending family court judges. I hate it with every fiber of my being, but they're in a very difficult position.
Right. It's not an easy job.
It's not a job I would want. I admire them, and I haven't talked with many of them. They struggle because they know they make mistakes, and on both directions, right? And it's really difficult for them. But I genuinely believe the majority of them are trying to do the best they can, but they're also human beings, right? They are going to make mistakes. We're all human beings. None of us is perfect. They also are trying to figure out, like you said, who's telling the truth and who's lying. And it's not as easy as you think, right? And the other side of it, too, is, I don't know about in Iowa, but in New York, where I was, I'm in North Carolina now, the family court judges were elected for 10 years. So they didn't have to worry too much about being reelected, but those last couple of years before an election, believe me, things kind of tightened down a little bit, right? Because they really, last thing they wanted was that screw up case right before they were trying to get elected. The other thing is, and I try and explain this to guys, trying to appeal a family court decision, you can do it. right? I know of one that was successful out of hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
They are giving total discretion. The appellate court is not going to overrule a family court judge unless it's an egregious violation of the law.
Mm-hmm.
If you can
Yep.
find something specific that broke the law, then you might have a chance, which is rare. These judges are not idiots, contrary to what most guys think. What are you seeing out there as far as, are you seeing similar situations where it's like a half hour and then they make the decision and then basically you're stuck with it?
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Well, and actually, that's one of the major issues that guys have in court, in my opinion, is even guys that go pro se, they'll write a trial brief, etc. But really, like you had mentioned at the beginning of this, you're going in there and it's going to be like Law and Order, and the evidence is going to be looked at and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of guys that we see that they have the beautifully laid out brief and all their evidence and all their exhibits, and none of that matters, and it kind of ends up a lot of times just being who is better at maneuvering the court, and that's a big issue.
Yep.
And you mentioned appeal. In Iowa, like I believe most states, we have the appellate court has the obligation to give great weight to the findings of the district court.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this best interest standard by preponderance of the evidence, and it's whatever the judge found to be in the best interest of the child, which is literally opinion, right?
Exactly.
We don't have mandates for the best interest of the child. We have factors to consider. But and to be completely honest with you, there's nothing in there. One of the factors to consider was child abuse. Did child abuse occur? Factor to consider. So we don't have anything currently saying if child abuse occurred that parent does not, by best interest of the kid, get custody. It's just considered. So all of this is opinion based. When you go to the appellate level, now they don't have the ability to reverse the opinions, because that's the judge's discretion.
Right.
And the findings of the district court are given great weight. So, yeah, you have the trial occurs based on opinion, not law. And then when you appeal it, you can only argue the law. So if people are, the opposition talks about these shared parenting bills as, oh, well, this abuser's going to get, going to get custody and all this and all that. Well, right now we have one shot to make the correct decision, because there is no really going back unless something horrendous happens. I appealed my own case actually several times. I'm sitting in two simultaneous appeals right now. But I won't get too much into my story, but it's kind of the same old. Is I was financially decimated in the divorce, and we went to what we call a temporary matters hearing, and I had to pay like double what I even bring home, etc. I had my lawyer, my family helped me with my lawyer, and I've got a good job, right? Like if this happened to someone else, wouldn't even make it as far as I could. But anyway, I ended up settling, and she has primary care, etc. But not after I didn't try everything I could in evidence, etc. Like I alluded to, evidence is ignored in the temporary matters, and we honestly find anyway, looking back, that about it's close to 90% of whoever the judge decides gets primary and temporary matters ends up winning in a trial anyway. Because it's the same judge, right? Like he's already made up his mind for the most part. But anyway, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years goes by, and my ex-wife files to files a petition to leave the state with the kids to in North Dakota, about 10 hours away. Obviously, I wanted to oppose that, but about, I think it was 9 days after she filed that petition, she um, she I get a call about 10 p.m. or so from the police department, and my kids were driven. Well, our 4-year-old was driven while she was intoxicated, and she hit a pole, backed into a tree, and I had to go get all 3 of the kids at the police department. The other 2 were left home alone. So I'm not going to get too much into that, but let's just say that I felt that I would be pretty confident in resisting the move to North Dakota. I was asking for primary care at this point because she was moving. I always asked for 50-50 in the beginning too, but at this point I had changed my mind from that a little bit. But 3 counts of child endangerment and OWI 9 days after filing the petition, I felt that would give me a pretty good chance of winning. But the court determined that I did not prove that I could provide superior care to the kids, and that's an interesting way of putting that as well. Should it matter who can provide the superior care? That's more of that adversarial issue, right?
Yep.
So, I appealed that, and exactly what we're talking about just before this is what happened. That the Court of Appeals says that they have to give great weight to the findings of the district court, and that my kids now live in North Dakota. But what I've always found interesting too was I didn't prove to be the superior parent, but I'm good enough to have them all summer unsupervised. It's like I'm sorry, but and it's all set up to make everyone adversarial with each other. But
exactly.
But in this particular instance, I guess I appealed that, and then I end up getting hit with paying the attorney fees for the move that she wanted to do, etc. So I know fully well how it goes for guys like and I'm appealing the attorney fees right now and all kinds of stuff. But I guess we focus on continuity of care here, and that's a big part of the decision is who historically watched the kids. But it gives no respect to the fact that, well, things are changing now because he got divorced,
right?
And then it's backed up by, okay, dad gets the kids all summer. So
well, the other side of it too is society has changed. Back when that mindset, the laws were written, primarily the dads were working and the moms were home taking care of the children. Those days are done, right? Child care is who's taking care of the children during the day or school. Women are working equal to men for the most part. I mean, I know it's a little bit different, but the time, as much as that's changed, the legalities and the thought process behind it has not. They're still stuck in the 1950s and 60s. That mindset that you as a father have to prove you're capable of taking care of the children, that's insanity, right? That's the reason we need these kind of bills. And a shared parenting bill is just the start, right? It's that whole mindset and the ability of a judge to say, well, you might not take care of them quite as well, in my opinion, as the mom. Come on.
well, it's like what is confusing me, and no lawyer's been able to answer this either, is what actually opens the door for them to come in and make that kind of decision? Like are we not worried about the kids that are with married people at all? It's just these 2 people get divorced, and now we have to decide which one is superior.
Right.
Like, are we going to compare still married people to parents that might be superior to them? And
it's lunacy is what it is.
I'm not tracking it. If no harm can be shown, then leave them alone.
Yep. It's there. I have often said there's no logic in this. It's just like one of the arguments I always throw out is a married couple has the decision, they have sole discretion on whether they're going to pay for their child's college education. They can simply
Hmm.
say to Johnny or Jane at 18, sure, go to college, it's all on you. Divorced? Oh, no, no, no. Right?
Well, an interesting thing about that in Iowa, real briefly, if you were married and divorced, yes, you pay for it's one third, one third, one third. So kid pays for a third, mom pays for a
Oh, they've
third,
actually
dad pays.
legislated that
Oh
because
yeah, oh yeah,
that's a
it's in
little better
statute.
than most, to be honest with you.
But if you're a child not of divorce and your parents were just together, say, I don't know, 15 years or however long, 1 year, 20 years, well, 18, I guess, but uh, that's not applicable. And actually, there was a woman that appealed this all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court. I can't think of the case law off the top of my head, but uh, if the Iowa Supreme Court basically decided that kids of just separation are not as negatively impacted as kids of divorce. Um, so
What?
that, yep. So if your parents were married, then you can have then you have a right to college subsidy from your parents. If your parents were just together 17 years, then you're screwed.
So, like living together. I mean,
Yep,
think about that
yep,
from a logic perspective. There is none.
yep, yeah.
I mean, and it's lunacy is really what it is. I didn't realize that was the case out there. You just educated me on something. Um, it's, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about this because one of the big oppositions to shared parenting they love to throw out is that the only reason fathers want it is because they don't want to pay child support.
Hmm.
Now, our bill, your bill, most every bill out there, there's no talk about child support. It's just here's our starting point. We'll go from there. How do you respond to the opponents that come out and go, the only reason he's fighting to see his kids is he doesn't want to pay child support? Or even from the Bar Association, I've heard lawyers say the same thing. How do you respond to that?
Well, I guess I would start off with the question is if that's the case, then why is having the child half the time cheaper than the child support?
Good point.
And no, I in either, but even if let's say that is the case, there's if you have your kids full time, there is going to be, even if you know what the amount is, and this is like some devious plan to get out of or reduce your child support, there's still things that are going to come up that you're going to be fully responsible for that are unforeseen.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, like if if a parent gets 50-50 and just based off of the income difference, they're going to be paying child support anyway. So
Exactly.
they're going to have child support on top of having the kids half the time.
Exactly the point to make right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just that's nonsensical to me, but I it's an effective argument of theirs, right? Because that's the status quo is well, that's the stigma of dad's a deadbeat, he just doesn't want to pay for his kids,
Right.
etc. But I don't know. If you turn to the Census Bureau, um, the truth, the fact of the matter is that dads are more likely to pay their child support than women who are in the opposite situation. That's right
It's
out of
not
the
even
Census Bureau.
close. It's
Yeah,
women. Last I knew, and again, my data's out of date. Is something like 40 some odd percent actually pay the women,
yeah,
whereas the men it's closer to 80, I believe.
yeah, yep. That's about right. 70, 80. But and then that the arg yeah the argument for that is that women get paid less, etc. But
That's
that's
a
all
whole.
based off
That's a
of
whole
that's
other
all.
show.
Well, yeah. That data is all based off of the fact that they have lower support obligations as well.
Right.
But what this actually says to me, I brought this up to people before, and they're like, "Wow, that's they're you're just misconstruing this, blah, blah, they throw all the mud at it. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to make the point that women are more deadbeat than dads or anything like that. What I'm saying with that data generally, when I bring that up, is what this means is that only the worst of the worst women lose custody. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
That's kind of the point I try to make with that.
Yeah, the argument we always made is very similar, was unless she's proven to be abusive or has committed acts of utter neglect, she's going to get custody. I mean, and that in New York, we saw that, right? Like I said, it was only about 7% of the guys ever actually got primary custody. And when I say primary custody, that means they had the majority of the time. That does not mean they had sole custody. That number is ridiculous. Back then, it was ridiculously low. And, to talk about the child support a little bit, having talked with guys across the country, when we put in a shared parenting bill, there's almost always either no verbiage whatsoever about child support, meaning the existing law doesn't get affected at all, or there's verbiage in there specifically stating this has no effect on whatever the law statute is. Shared parenting does not really change child support. I think a lot of guys don't understand that. And definitely the opposite. I think the opposition knows that, but they're using it as an argument to sling mud, as you say, right? Is so, well, he's just trying to avoid child support. It does. If you have exactly 50-50 custody, the person with the higher income is going to pay child support, period. That's, to my knowledge, universal.
And it's not even a great discount.
No, at all.
You get the kids half the time, and they deduct, I don't know, 20% off the top of the child support. So,
well, I made this argument in front of the subcommittee in New York. I said, because that was brought up, it was actually asked of me as a question. Basically, it was, well, are you trying to avoid paying child support? And I said, well, let's look at it reality. Let's say I do have exactly equal time. I have to pay all those costs to feed, clothe, have a house or a roof over our head. I have all that, and I'm still paying her child support. So where's the benefit to me? And the stunned look on the person's face when she asked that question and I responded that way said it all, because she knew I had her, right? And that is the reality. The majority of the time, it's the guys who make more income. Whole other discussion, right? They're going to still pay child support. I know of instances, and myself, when I got custody, she did not get ordered to pay child support, which I could have appealed, and I would have won, because the child support statutes are cut and dried pretty much. But, I did a cost-benefit analysis, and the cost to hire a lawyer and have them do that whole process, I was going to pay double out what I would have possibly gotten in child support. So financially, it just wasn't worth my trouble. But it speaks to that whole area and that whole issue.
Well, there's they like to make that argument a lot with the get out of child support thing, but then they act like you're some monster for bringing up the opposing argument to that, is that they want the kids for the child support.
Oh, they don't do that, Jesse. Come on.
Yeah, well, I one of our paralegals had a fairly recent mediation case where in their mediation, the opposing counsel offered stipulation to where if Dad paid $250,000 out of the assets, she would agree to 50-50 physical care.
Oh.
But if she didn't get that $250,000, he's unfit, right? And he's not a good enough parent. So that does happen. I don't use that as my strongest. I don't use that argument often. But if the child support's so substantial to where a dad wants to have custody of his kids to get out of it, then certainly is it substantial enough to entice someone to want their kids for it, right?
You're not supposed to talk about that, my friend. That's not allowed. It's
Yeah.
you're right though. It's I would argue that's the number one argument the opposition uses to try and shut us down
Hmm.
from being
I think I.
fathers. And it's a completely false argument. And when you point it out, I mean, there are exceptions, but for the most part, it holds true. It's cut and dried. You're still going to pay child support. And then when you point that out and you point out the things you're pointing out, they get really upset about it because they know their argument holds no water. It doesn't pass any test. But to their credit, it works.
Oh yeah, it's really effective. Well, there's so much propaganda backing it up, right? The deadbeat dads, dad walked away, etc. And um, it, and there's guys that have walked away
Of
and that are
course there
deadbeats.
are.
No one argues against that,
Absolutely.
But it's like, but I and many other are not. So, but don't treat me like the guy that walked away and just wants out of the child support.
Right.
Um,
When you look at the actual numbers, and I was talking with a politician here in North Carolina, probably 2-3 months ago, and I said to him, "Do you know that 80% of the divorces are filed by mothers and women?" And he looked at me like I had my head cut off. He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, 80% of the time, it's the woman filing for divorce, not the guy. The guys aren't walking away; they're getting thrown out. And that's not true. I said, go look it up, dude. I mean, I didn't quite say it that way. And then I said, you are responsible for it. You've incentivized them to do that because the bottom line is they know they can push dad out of the house. They're going to get the house, the car. I always said the house, the car, part of his income, and the kids.
mm-hmm.
Win, 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 right? The chances of them losing any or all of them are slim to none, and Slim's left town. So in his particular case, and I want to touch on this but not go too far into it, he happened to be a Republican. All right, and I talked to both sides, and I will tell you right now, neither side supports men. Let me be very clear on that, in my opinion. I said to him, you created this situation. What do you mean? Because your belief is that guys are walking away. So your party back in the 70s and 80s supported all this legislation to force guys to stay. And what has ended up happening is you are now forcing them out of the family. And he completely dismissed it, of course, because he doesn't want to accept the reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious what's happening. The person, if you take just pure moral values out of the equation, then the person that is more likely to file divorce is the one that would gain the most advantage from filing divorce. And I don't know how they would argue against that in particular. I haven't had too many conversations related to that one, but all I know is that I see many guys staying in marriages because they know they'll lose the kids.
Absolutely. It happens. I hear it every day, actually, whether it's on, people, because I make TikTok videos as you do. And I'm sure you get constant messages as I do from guys going, oh, I'm in that situation, or here's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically looking to vent, and feel free, right? I'll help you out as much as I can. But so many guys just feel like I'm stuck. I can't leave. For a wide variety of reasons. A lot of them stay because they want to be there for their children and they know they're going to get cut off. That's probably, in my opinion, the number one reason why they stay. Forget financial. It's that they know they're not going to see their children anymore. Or they're going to get, 4 days out of the month and maybe an hour a week to 2 hours a week for dinner during the week. That's pretty much what you're going to get.
Well, I like that. I've always thought it was funny, the argument of that you're an angry dad, right? I guess what I'd like to ask is, under what conditions is it okay for someone to be angry, right?
Yeah.
Like, like, okay, if someone, murders your kid, can you be angry? Yes. If someone uh, beats your kid, can you be angry? Yes. If someone gatekeeps you from your own child, can you be angry? Oh no, absolutely not. You can't be angry about that. You're a deadbeat.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I always make
it's
the argument to the women that oppose. I go, I'll tell you what. Why don't we reverse it? You'll get to see your kids for 4 days a month and a couple hours during the week. You're going to be happy with that, right? And they just look at you like, no, and that speaks to your anger issue. Of course, they'd be angry, and rightfully so, I might add, right?
mm-hmm.
When you have your child ripped away from you, who is not going to be angry?
Well, I think there's something damn wrong with you if you're not angry about that.
That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, what kind of a parent are you if you're not upset about that?
Yeah, but they take that's what I've just all this is about, the controlling how the language is used.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a protective parent that loves their kids, and you're angry about this. You're a deadbeat, and you're angry about this money. It's just how they've manipulated the languages. There's just so much propaganda behind this, and that's part of why I started talking on TikTok. Is I just wanted to say the things that they're trying to make us not say.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met a whole group of people that are fantastic. A lot of people that make similar videos, and we all back each other. And like I've said before, it's much harder to get followers and things when you're talking this way than instead of the other way. But what I found is that the people that are in this circle and are speaking out are very active, useful people and I've had larger creators come after me, and they get shot down pretty quick because they may have 100,000 people, but how many of them actually care? At any point it seems that anyone in my groups, myself or otherwise, there's always a good 50 of us that come in pretty strong. So and I think that's part of what needs done is we need to start speaking out more. And I think that's always been the case. And we need to ignore when they come after with that weak rhetoric. People need educated on how to strike that down. Like this deadbeat just trying to get out of child support stuff. People need to know, first off, that is going to be what they come after you with, and second, here's how you destroy that argument.
Yeah, it's a contention that I've long talked about 30 years now. Guys need to step up. All right. I get it. It's a tough situation. You're dealing with emotional distress. I'm trying to be kind about that. But if you don't speak up, it's not going to change. And when I say speak up, it's not screaming and yelling. It's doing what you do in your videos, which is educating. That's the way I would put it. Your videos are excellent because you're trying to educate. You're talking about your bill, why the bill, the reasons behind it, and all that. And then when the opposition comes at you, and they come at me too, right? And the problem they have is they know they can't win on merit. So I joke about it all the time. They love to point out that I'm bald. Okay, that's fine. I don't know what that has to do with it, but
oh yeah, there's a lady in Canada came after me, telling me what was she was telling me that she doesn't listen to idiots with mouth mullets, just because I had this little, and it's like,
but to their credit though, it works, right?
Oh yeah.
Then the next level is when they lose that battle, they'll try and silence you. So, I've gotten banned multiple times. I don't know if you've dealt with it. I'm being shadow banned right now. I know I am.
I'm kind of off and on in a shadow ban. Sometimes I'll try really hard, get nothing, but I don't know. I've read TikTok's policy, and I'm just very careful about how I say things. I'll say that.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. As I've said many times, the first time I got banned, I absolutely deserved it. I don't deny that. But the other three times, basically what happened is the feminists got upset and basically mass reported me. That's their tactic. And they do it to all of
Oh
us,
yeah.
you know.
Oh, absolutely.
And social media, we're talking about TikTok, but Instagram's not much better. YouTube, I got to be fair, is pretty good about allowing us to speak and not, holding us back. But even setting all those aside, just in general, when you're talking with people in public, when you're talking with friends, family, and all that, guys, you need to speak up, because for every word we say, the opposition's saying 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have the media in their pocket. Yeah, you can sway the media sometimes, as we did a few years ago, but us sharing our stories, you have to remember, we stand on the high ground. Nothing we're asking for is unreasonable. Men aren't saying we want sole custody 100% of the time. I have never once heard a guy say that. The majority of the time, and you actually said it, I wanted 50-50, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you started your divorce, that's what you went in the courtroom hoping to get. That's where guys start. I'm sorry to be a sexist pig, but I'm going to say it. Women start with, I want 100%.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Everything.
everything. I want it all. I want to destroy him.
But
Go
but
ahead.
what I've seen though, and why that mostly is once they talk to an attorney, boom, you're entitled. Oh, I'm gonna get you all this that you're entitled to. You deserve this and that.
Oh yeah.
We see it's like it's 90% of the time easy. Once she goes and talks to an attorney, that is now a high conflict divorce. If it wasn't before, it is now.
Yeah, I talked with David about that when we on the podcast last week. David Pizarro, who's a divorce attorney out in the West Coast, he said exactly what you just said. Women, he said, if I wanted to be rich, I would represent women, not men, because all you got to do is say what you're saying, get their emotions stirred up, and you're going to make a mint, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just maneuvering that court is so big, and I think that's why an evidentiary, a clear and convincing evidence standard is absolutely needed at minimum. But even that though won't stop the emotional manipulation, but at least it's a start.
And that's the key point. It's a start, right? Change is going to happen in small increments. It's not. A lot of guys want everything all at once. It's never going to happen that way. Small steps, little bites of that elephant. And
What?
Go ahead.
Well, 100%, because we see that all in at people that contact Iowa fathers all the time. Is, it's like this bill doesn't have this, it doesn't have this, and that it's already probably going to have about the most resistance of any bill out there right now, regardless of what it's missing that you would like, and
Right.
we would maybe like that too. But it's they come in with a lot of they come in wanting to just storm the Capitol.
Yep.
You can't do that because they'll swat us away. We have to. We don't have the numbers or support. Well, that's if people want to go all out, they need to help bring us the numbers and support.
That brings my next question which is how can they support you? How can people get more information? Talk a little bit about how they can reach out to you, how they can support getting the bill passed, and so on.
Well, right now, I think the best way to do it is to be emailing the House of Representatives. The Judiciary Committee the chair is Representative Stephen Holt. Contacting him, they can go to our website. We're always looking for people to recruit. That we have, like I said, we have an email list on there. Information about the bill and supporting data can be found at iowafathers.org /SF274. We've got all the emails on there. We keep fairly current news about the progress of the bill, and a lot of supporting research. Like I said, the opposition does not have supporting research. There is nothing out there. There is nothing out there saying that unequal custody is beneficial to kids. Nothing. we can actually bring them data that shows that shared parenting is beneficial. So I guess what I would ask people is that they spread that info as far and wide as they can. Um, get their families, friends, just sending emails. Um, we do accept donations, which we pretty much only use for advertising if we have that. But I'm not even asking for that. All of us work free. We just need we need bodies. We need to email, and we need to get out there and spread awareness far and wide.
You know, one of the things that I would say is if you're in Iowa, you need to be doing this. If you're not in Iowa, you need to be doing this, right? We need to support each other. One of the benefits that we had back in the day in New York is we had nationwide support for our bill. I talked a little bit about the fax thing that we did, but we had support from across the country. Now, I will tell you, politicians are going to weigh in state at the state level far more than outside of state contact. But that said, and you talked about this, contacting them, and I will reach out to them. I will guarantee you I will reach out and say, look, I don't live in your state, but as you said, all the evidence shows it benefits the children. My fight is not as an Iowan. My fight is as a parent who cares about children. So I would like you to consider this, but you got to be careful with your verbiage. One thing I would say to people, do not get angry and put nasty. It's not going to work. It's going to backfire on you. All it takes is one nasty out of 100 to turn them off. It really does. It just, I would even say 1 out of 1,000, right? Be polite, be respectful. I get it. I get the emotion you have. I get that it's something that touches you in your heart, but you have to set that aside. Reach out and just be very polite. Kindness wins, right? Let the opposition be the nasty ones. And this is something that I try and educate guys on. And this applies in family court. It applies in the public domain, all of that. But it really applies when you're dealing with legislators, whether at federal, state, even local level. You're never going to get anywhere with anger. Now, if you got 5,000 people standing in a protest, that's a whole other ballgame. But we aren't going to get that. Our side is not going to get that. We've held protests. We got, a few hundred. We actually did great. We got a few hundred. We were happy with that. They held a protest and had a few thousand. I mean, it wasn't even close. So go to Jesse's website, which is what again?
IowaFathers.org/SF274 will take you to the information.
There you go. And I encourage everyone watching this to just take a few minutes. It takes literally not even 5 minutes probably. Even just simply as an email saying, I support shared parenting. Please support Bill 274. That's it. Because it will count. You may not think it will, but it does. Numbers count, right? Politicians care about one thing and one thing only, getting reelected. It's that simple. So whatever they think they need to do to get reelected, which is primarily make the public happy, that's what they're going to do. So the more that you can do that, the better chances the bill will have, and the better chances not just this bill passes, but we get significant change down the road. This is a first step. This is, that whole saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. This is the first step. If you want things like child support reform and all that, which are needed, we're not saying they're not, you've got to start somewhere, and just being active, just talking about it. That's the other thing, guys. Guys do not like to talk about it. And we're guys, so I get it. But we have to, right? You need to go to Jesse's TikTok and like his videos. You need to, I'll be blunt, you need to like mine. It sounds crazy, but that whole algorithm is driven by that. They hold us back. They shadow ban us. But if it starts seeing, oh my God, I'm getting like after like after like, the computer algorithm is going to go, all right, I'm going to bump it up a little bit more. It's a numbers game, plain and simple. You know, so that I know I'm pontificating a little bit. It's very passionate of mine, but we need to help each other out and support each other. Jesse, anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I'm glad you said just exactly what you said. Is we 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 have large creators out there, a couple of them anyway, for our cause, but we really do need to all gather together. And if I 100% agree with you, if they're for our cause, they need to follow, because there's already so much against them, and I think that's important. And what the opposition to this is, or what the opposition wants to this, is for us to be silent and to be silent, or be silented. And we need to, by the numbers, fight against that.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm glad that social media is growing in the way it is.
I think it's helping the cause a lot. You know, we've been the silent group for so long, and we've got a hard fight against us to change things. But our cause is just. And again, not with anger. We need to just speak out, share what we're experiencing. You talked a little bit about your case. I've talked in the past about mine a little bit. Just sharing that. And it's painful, but it also will help you, by the way, just to kind of throw that out there. Is one of the things that helped me to heal was that I started speaking out. And then I was finding out, wait, it's not just me. Literally thousands and tens of thousands of guys at this point I've talked to. They're stunned to realize, wait, it's not just me. He's dealing with the same thing I am. And then you see, you know, the women start to understand it and hear it. And that's the tough battle. But the more we speak out, the more we share our stories, the more we show we are not fighting for us, but the children, which is what we really are. You are, I am, most guys are. It's not about us. It's about the children. They're not. They're fighting for themselves. I don't care what they say. As we talked about, you know, whether it's child support or whatever, you look at how they approach the issue. It's always from a them, not the children's perspective. So that's where we need to really just hold the high ground. Be patient too, because it's not going to happen overnight. We're trying to fight 50 odd years against us. We're not going to change it in 5 weeks. But the work you're doing, I applaud you. I think I know how hard it is. I've been in the trenches like you are. I had to step away after a while, to be honest with you. Because it just overwhelmed me. You know, I fought that fight for 15 odd years, and I stepped away for 5-6 years just to kind of heal myself, because I'm sure you deal with the venom directed at you at a personal level, an organizational level. It's tough to deal with. That's where us all supporting each other helps also, right? And it's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, right? I'm back in the fight. I wish I hadn't stepped away. I needed to, though. But now I think I'm able to do so because all that stuff's behind me. I don't have to worry about going to family court ever again or any of that. But being able to support guys, being able to support people like yourself, and really stepping up our game as men, right? We need to help each other mentally, spiritually, all of that. One final thought, Jesse, I'll throw it back to you for one final thought, and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, I think we covered about all of it. I guess I would just like to say that if you want to speak out on this issue and you don't know what to say, just start telling your story.
Bingo.
I guarantee you'll find hordes of people that'll understand, back you, and have been exactly where you are. If you don't know, I like to say on TikTok, I'm an engineer. I'm kind of introverted. I'm not a real great public speaker. But one thing I can do is just tell the truth. And I think that's how we need to approach it.
If someone wanted to follow you on TikTok, can you go ahead and give them your TikTok handle?
Yeah, Jesse Cickavage. It's just my full name. Nothing to hide.
I like to do that because I want to be able to promote you. Are you on any of the other social medias?
Uh, I'm on Facebook, but personally too, same
Same thing.
handle. But we've just started a Iowa Fathers TikTok and a Twitter and a YouTube. Those three don't have much on them right now, but Iowa Fathers is quite active on Facebook at the moment. But we're going to be building on all of them because we need to get word out. So.
Yeah, now I will put links to all of his down in the show notes, so they'll be able to go find you and support you. Hopefully, you won't get too many haters, though, and it does happen. I'm sorry to say, but for the most part,
yeah, bring them on.
that's my attitude too. Jesse, thank you for joining me today and telling your story, and thank you for your support of the bill, guys. Go support the bill. Go support Jesse. Go support fathers yourselves and all of that. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and close things down. I'm Dan from Men Need to Be Heard. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to share this. The more word we get out, the better it'll be. And on that note, I will see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.